perfect. You are perfect.
Next time, I'd like some latkes.
I make great latkes. Genius latkes. You won't be sorry.
See.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week it's Passover. So just in time for the Seder, we're taking a crack at Midge Maisel's marvelous brisket. I think that's what the show's called. For this application, we want a first cut or flat cut piece of brisket, which lives up to its name by being relatively flat, which is going to help it cook more evenly during its braise. To begin, we are placing the brisket fat cap down in a cold stainless steel roasting pan. Why cold, you ask? Well, two reasons really. First off, it's going to help more of the fat render out of the fat. Plus, starting it in a cold pan along with the weight of a stainless steel skillet is going to make the fat stick while it browns, so it's going to brown more evenly. We're blasting this guy over medium-high heat for about 4 to 5 minutes or until evenly browned, at which point we're going to remove the skillet, give her a flip, and set it down to brown on the beefy side, during which time we need to perform some minimal prep on some vegetables. First, 4 medium carrots are peeled and cut into 1-inch chunks, the same with 4 or 5 stalks of celery. 4 medium onions are peeled and sliced thick on a mandolin. 4 medium cloves of garlic are crushed and peeled, and a few sprigs of thyme are gently jostled. Back over on the burner, our brisket has become beautifully browned on the bottom, and it's ready to be set aside while we prep our vegetables and prepare the braising liquid. So go ahead and set that on a plate, and depending on how fatty your brisket is, you might have accrued a great deal of fat in the bottom of the roaster, all but about 2 tablespoons of which we're going to pour off, adding our onions to the pan and slowly beginning to caramelize them over the course of about 10 minutes over medium heat. Then, both to help deepen flavor and assist in caramelization, we're going to add a 1/4 cup of light brown sugar, one of the first of many sweet elements in this sweet and sour Ashkenazi brisket. Go ahead and cook those onions for about 8 to 10 minutes over medium heat or until they pick up some dazzling gold color. At this point, we're going to add 2 things that have been present in every Passover brisket I've ever had: chopped celery and carrot, which we're going to saute for another 1 to 2 minutes just until they pick up a little bit of color. Then we are crushing in our 4-ish cloves of garlic, sauteing that for about 30 seconds or until fragrant, and then we're adding 1 to 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, which we're also going to cook for 30 seconds to a minute. Now, before we deglaze all that beautiful fond off the bottom of the pot, we need to add a thickener. You can use 2 tablespoons of flour, or if you want to keep it kosher, use 2 tablespoons of potato flour. We're letting that toast for about 1 minute until the raw flour smell dissipates, cranking the heat up to medium-high and deglazing with about 1.5 cups of dry red wine. Use this opportunity, as we always do, to scrape up all that beautiful stuff off the bottom of the pot. And then we need to continue building our braising base. I'm starting with 1.5 cups of beef broth. Not quite enough liquid in the pan here, so I'm adding another 1/2 cup of red wine. And now we continue layering the sweet and sour. First, about 1/2 cup of ketchup and 1 cup of crushed tomatoes. You could substitute the ketchup with a cup of Coca-Cola if you're feeling really 1950s, but this brisket was pretty hard to come by, so I'm not taking any chances. Now, to bring a little bit more acidity to the sauce, I'm adding 1/4 cup of white wine vinegar, 3 or 4 dried bay leaves, and a few sprigs of fresh thyme to help enhance the savory, then spicing things up with about 1 tablespoon of paprika and an optional teaspoon of cayenne pepper if you want things a little spicy or if you're Chef John, and then 1 last hit of sweet and sour with about 2 tablespoons each of honey and Dijon mustard. You can see why this style of brisket is often referred to as kosher barbecue. Give it a taste for seasoning, hit it with kosher salt and freshly ground pepper as necessary, and nestle the brisket into the braising liquid. And then it's time for this braise to live up to its name by being braised. That is, covering tightly with aluminum foil and placing in a 300-degree Fahrenheit oven for 4 hours, or until your house smells amazing, the braising liquid has thickened, and the brisket feels like it's not even there when you stab it with a fork. Now, if you're making this brisket same day, then you're just going to defat the sauce, slice, and serve as is. But if you've got the time, you ideally want to let this guy cool off for about an hour, separate the brisket from the sauce, remove the spent thyme sprigs and bay leaves, and fridge everything overnight. I'm keeping the brisket in my intended reheating and serving vessel, and pouring the braising liquid into a more manageable container. Fridging overnight is going to accomplish a few things. First, it's going to help our flavors deepen and meld. Second, it's going to make all the fat in the sauce solidify in an easy to scrape off layer. This is an important step, otherwise you're going to end up with a really greasy sauce. Third, it's going to give us the ability to do some good old-fashioned finger tasting. And fourth, it's going to make the brisket exceptionally easy to carve into very, very thin slices. Now, for an exceptionally tender brisket that straight up melts in your mouth, we want to carve across the grain. This way we're making the meat fibers as short as possible, so the knife is doing all the work fork instead of your mandible. Once the meat is sliced into thin slices, we're pouring half of the braising liquid into our intended heating and serving casserole, nestling the brisket in over top, trying to fan it out a little bit so they all get exposure to the sauce, and pouring the rest of the sauce over top the whole affair. Lidding it up tight and placing it into a preheated 375° Fahrenheit oven for about 45 minutes until vigorously bubbling and heated through and ready to be devoured, Passover style. I do not have any of the usual Seder accoutrements, so I'm going to go ahead and serve this with a light spinach salad, something light and fresh to cut through all the richness. Serve up a generous pile of slices, make sure to hit it with some extra sauce, and it's time to dig into one of my favorite examples of what slow and low cooking can do. This brisket is sweet and sour and savory and tender and rich and meaty, and it makes the perfect bribe to help your shady husband's stand-up career. If you have an extremely fatty brisket like this one, you might want to trim off some of that before cooking, but that's not going to stop me from entering this not only into the Clean Plate Club, but the coveted Second Helpings Club.